Hey everyone, I'm Ashley, and my story is about spells, betrayals, romance, and the poor choices I've made in life. It's a bit long, but I want to share the details of my mistakes so you don't end up alone like me. Ever since I was little, I've been a dreamer. I remember spending hours playing with my dolls, imagining love stories and happy families. However, from an early age, I also felt a certain insecurity. Maybe it was the fear of not being good enough, or not finding someone who truly loved me. I saw my parents as an example of love and partnership, but I also knew that not all marriages were happy. My aunt, for instance, had been divorced twice, and I saw the suffering it caused. These insecurities began to manifest in different ways. At school, I was shy and had difficulty making friends. I constantly worried about what others thought of me, and avoided situations that could expose me to ridicule. This made me feel isolated at times, but I found comfort in my dreams and the stories I created in my mind. One of the most memorable moments of my childhood was when I participated in my older cousin's wedding. I was only 8, but I was enchanted by the ceremony, the white dress, the flowers, and the music. Adolescence is a phase of discovery, and for me, it was no different. Between classes, homework, and outings with friends, I began to notice the glances and smiles from boys. Shyness was still a barrier, but gradually I opened up to new experiences and met some guys. My first loves were brief and without much depth. There was Jake, a classmate who invited me to the movies. It was a shy date, full of awkward silences and nervous laughter. Then came Ryan, who sent me notes during math class. These little flirtations were exciting, but they never developed into anything serious. It wasn't until I was 17 that I had my first serious relationship. His name was Luke. He was a year older, in his senior year of high school, and popular. Luke had a charming way about him, and a confidence that attracted me. He made me feel special, like I was the only girl in the world. Our relationship started intensely. We went for walks in the park, attended parties together, and spent hours talking about our dreams and plans for the future. Luke seemed to be everything I had ever dreamed of. He was attentive, caring, and made me laugh like no one else. I felt safe by his side, and began to believe that I had finally found true love. However, like many love stories in adolescence, ours also had its challenges. Luke had an ex-girlfriend, Piper, with whom he had broken up just a few months before we started dating. At first, I didn't mind. He assured me that their relationship was in the past, and that I was the only one who mattered now. But over time, I began to notice some changes in Luke's behavior. He became more distant, spent more time on his phone, and always seemed to have his head somewhere else. I tried to ignore these signs, attributing them to the stress of senior year and concerns about college applications. It was only when a friend told me she had seen Luke and Piper together at a coffee shop that my confidence began to crumble. I confronted Luke, hoping he would deny it and reassure me. But instead, he confessed. He said he had met with Piper a few times and that he still had feelings for her. The betrayal hit me like a blow. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and deeply hurt. Everything I had built in my mind about our relationship seemed to crumble. Luke tried to justify himself, saying he was confused and didn't want to hurt me. But his words only increased my pain. We broke up soon after. I spent weeks crying and feeling lost. The insecurities of childhood returned with full force, and I wondered if I would ever find someone who truly loved me. At Vante, I still carried the scars of Luke's betrayal, but I was determined to move forward and find true love. It was during this time that I met Ethan. He was different from the other guys I had known. Ambitious, full of ideas, and with a contagious passion for technology, Ethan had a sparkle in his eyes that attracted me. We met at a party through mutual friends. While most people were talking about college and parties, Ethan was excitedly explaining a new digital marketing project he was developing. I was fascinated by his energy and the way he believed in his ideas. He seemed to have a clear plan for the future, something I deeply admired. Our relationship started intensely. We spent hours talking about our dreams and plans. Ethan wanted to make money online, create a successful startup, and change the world with his innovations. I supported him unconditionally, believing that together we could achieve anything. However, as time passed, I began to realize that Ethan's ambitions weren't translating into concrete results. He spent hours on the computer, researching, developing ideas, and participating in online forums, but he never seemed to make any progress. His projects didn't advance, and often, he became frustrated with the lack of progress. I tried to be understanding and patient. I knew the path to success wasn't always easy, and Ethan was trying hard. But at the same time, I started to feel a growing concern. We had been together for almost a year, and despite all the time and effort Ethan devoted to his projects, there were no signs that we were any closer to achieving our goals. The frustrations began to affect our relationship. Ethan became irritable and discouraged frequently. I tried to cheer him up, suggesting new approaches and offering my support, but it seemed like nothing worked. He closed himself off in his virtual world, while I felt increasingly isolated. I knew Ethan had great potential, and that his ideas were brilliant. But the lack of progress and the constant feeling of stagnation were wearing me down. I wanted more than just dreams and promises. I wanted a real life, with concrete achievements and a stable future. It was in this moment of vulnerability that Alex entered the scene. He began to approach me subtly. At first, it was just casual conversations during lunch or funny comments about work. He had an easy way of making people feel comfortable, and I was no exception. Soon, our conversations became more frequent and personal. Alex listened to me attentively, asked questions about my life, and seemed genuinely interested in me. Alex was everything Ethan wasn't: present, attentive, and stable. He had a solid career, was successful, and seemed to have life under control. Compared to Ethan's virtual and uncertain world, Alex represented a safe harbor, something I was beginning to desperately desire. One day, after a particularly stressful meeting at work, Alex invited me for coffee. I accepted without hesitation, eager for a moment of relaxation. During coffee, he got straight to the point. He said he liked me and wanted to get to know me better. I was surprised by his frankness, but at the same time, I felt flattered. It was good to be desired and valued. From that moment on, our relationship began to change. Alex became more present, offering me rides home, inviting me to lunches and dinners. I felt torn. I still had feelings for Ethan and wanted to respect our relationship, but the prospect of a future with Alex was tempting. He seemed to be everything I needed at that moment: stability, affection, and attention. It was during one of these rides that Alex finally declared himself. He said he was in love with me and wanted to be by my side. My heart raced, and at that moment, I knew I had to make a decision. Ethan was a dream that seemed increasingly distant, while Alex was a tangible and present reality. With a mix of sadness and relief, I decided to end things with Ethan. He was devastated, and so was I. I told him I needed something more concrete, that I couldn't continue living on promises and dreams. Ethan tried to convince me to stay, promised things would get better, but I had already made my decision. Alex and I started dating soon after, and the relationship was going well. He was attentive, caring, and seemed to be the perfect partner. However, life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. It was during this phase of apparent stability that I received a job offer that would change everything. The job offer came from a renowned company in my field. It was a golden opportunity, a higher position, a significantly better salary, and the chance to grow professionally. When I received the email with the offer, my heart raced. It was everything I had always wanted for my career. But there was a catch. The new company was in a different part of the city, which meant I could no longer have lunch with Alex every day. I talked to Alex about the offer. He was understanding and encouraged me to accept. He said it was a great opportunity and that he wanted to see me happy and fulfilled. Despite his support, I felt a knot in my stomach, but I accepted the offer and, in the following weeks, began to prepare for the transition. Saying goodbye to my coworkers was harder than I had imagined. I had created bonds and memories there, but I was ready for the next step. The first day at the new job was a mix of nervousness and excitement. The company was larger, more dynamic, and demanded a lot from me. And then, the job change began to impact my relationship with Alex. Before, we had lunch together every day as we worked at the same company. It was a routine where we shared our concerns and supported each other mutually. Now, I spent most of the day away from him, and our conversations became less frequent. Alex tried to be understanding, but I could see that he missed me. The evenings changed too. Before, I would come home and have time to relax and talk with Alex. Now, I brought work home, reviewed documents, and answered emails until late at night. Alex began to feel neglected, and I felt guilty for not being able to balance my professional and personal life. But then I adapted to the new tasks and no longer brought work home. I could leave early and go home, but that's when things took a turn. As time passed, I began to notice a subtle but disturbing change in our relationship. Alex, who had once been so present and caring, began to distance himself. At first, it was small things. He started coming home later, claiming he needed to spend more time with friends or had work commitments. Our evenings, which were once full of conversations and laughter, became silent and lonely. I found myself increasingly alone, while Alex always seemed to be busy with something or someone that wasn't me. I tried to ignore the signs, telling myself it was just a phase. But the situation only got worse. Alex spent entire weekends away, going out with friends to parties and events, while I stayed at home, waiting for a message or a call that rarely came. Now I felt neglected and undervalued, as if I was no longer a priority in his life. One night, after another lonely weekend, I decided to seek advice from my friend Megan. She had always been a sensible and understanding person, and I desperately needed someone to confide in. Megan welcomed me with a warm hug and a cup of tea, ready to listen to everything I had to say. I told her about Alex's distancing, about how he seemed to prefer the company of his friends to mine, and how it was affecting me. Megan listened attentively, without interrupting, and when I finished, she sighed deeply. "Honey, I'm so sorry you're going through this," she said, holding my hand. "But you need to remember your worth. You deserve someone who values you and makes you feel special, not someone who pushes you aside." Megan's words resonated deeply with me. I knew she was right, but I still loved Alex and wanted to believe we could overcome this phase. Megan suggested that I try to talk to him, be honest about how I felt, and give him a chance to change. That night, when Alex finally came home, I decided to follow Megan's advice. I waited for him to settle in, and with my heart in my hand, I began to speak. "Alex, we need to talk," I began, trying to stay calm. "I feel like we're drifting apart. You spend so much time away, with your friends, and I feel neglected. It's hurting me." Alex seemed surprised by my words but didn't interrupt. When I finished, he sighed and ran his hand through his hair. "I didn't know you felt this way," he said, with a tone that mixed surprise and guilt. "I was just trying to deal with work stress and find some fun, but I never meant to hurt you." The conversation was long and full of emotions. Alex promised he would make an effort to spend more time with me and be more present in our relationship. In the days that followed, Alex really tried. He canceled some plans with friends, planned special nights for us, and seemed more attentive to my needs. Despite Alex's efforts to reconnect, things between us didn't go back to how they were before. There was an emotional distance that, no matter how hard we tried, we couldn't overcome. I found myself increasingly anxious and insecure, fearing he would drift away again. It was in this moment of fragility that my friend Megan suggested something unusual. We were in her apartment, having coffee and venting about the ups and downs of my relationship with Alex. I was desperate for a solution, anything that could bring back the attentive and caring Alex I had known. "Honey, maybe you should try something different," Megan said, with an enigmatic look. "Have you ever heard of love-binding spells?" I stared at her, surprised. I had never been a superstitious person, but at that moment, I was willing to try anything. "Love-binding spells?" I asked, curious and skeptical at the same time. "Yes," Megan replied. "They're rituals that can help strengthen the connection between two people. I know some people who swear they work." The idea seemed absurd, but desperation can lead us to consider things we would normally dismiss. Megan showed me some websites and forums where people shared their experiences with love-binding spells. Most of the stories were positive, with accounts of couples who reconnected and found happiness. I decided to try it. I chose a simple spell, something that didn't require many ingredients or complicated rituals. The spell involved lighting a red candle, writing Alex's name on a piece of paper, and reciting some words of intention while visualizing our love growing stronger. I waited until night, when Alex was out with friends, to perform the spell. I sat in the living room, turned off the lights, and lit the red candle. With my heart racing, I wrote Alex's name on the paper and began to recite the spell words. By the power of fire and flame, may Alex's love for me strengthen and our connection renew. May he see me with new eyes and our passion rekindle. I closed my eyes and visualized Alex and me together, happy and in love, like we were in the beginning. I felt a wave of hope and determination. I extinguished the candle and kept the paper with Alex's name in a safe place. In the days that followed, I watched Alex closely, hoping to see some sign of change. However, nothing seemed different. He continued to make an effort to spend more time with me, but the emotional distance was still there. The spell, it seemed, hadn't worked. I told Megan about my disappointment, and she tried to console me. Maybe a stronger spell is needed, she suggested. Or maybe it needs more time to take effect. Well, the failure of the simple spell I tried left me even more desperate. The distance between Alex and me seemed insurmountable, and I felt like I was losing the man I loved. It was in this moment of desperation that I decided to seek more serious help. I remembered the stories I had heard in town about a woman known for her powerful spells. They said she had helped many people solve love problems, and that her spells never failed. With a heavy heart and a mix of skepticism and hope, I decided to seek out this woman. Her name was Madame Rose, a middle-aged woman who lived in an old house on the outskirts of town. The house had a mysterious air, with herbs drying on the porch and esoteric symbols painted on the door. That afternoon, I knocked on Madame Rose's door, nervous and uncertain about what to expect. She greeted me with a welcoming smile. "Come in, my dear," she said, her voice soft and comforting. I sat in a wooden chair in the small living room, while Madame Rose prepared an herbal infusion. The sweet and earthy aroma filled the air, creating an atmosphere of calm and mysticism. "Tell me what brought you here," she asked, handing me a cup of tea. I explained the situation, talking about Alex, the distancing, and my failed attempt to use a simple spell. Madame Rose listened attentively, without interrupting, her eyes fixed on mine. "Love is a powerful force, but also fragile," she said finally. "Sometimes, we need a little help to restore balance. I'll prepare a spell for you, but remember, my dear, the true strength of love comes from within us." Madame Rose began to prepare the spell, gathering ingredients that seemed to come straight out of a fairy tale. Rose petals, crystals, a red candle, and a small bottle of scented oil. She instructed me to write Alex's name on a piece of paper, while she recited prayers. "By the power of love and union, may Alex and you find each other again. May he see the light of your love, and may the flame between you rekindle," she said, as she lit the candle and poured the scented oil over the paper. The ritual was intense and charged with energy. When it was over, Madame Rose handed me a small amulet, a crystal wrapped in a silver thread. "Keep this close to your heart," she instructed. "And remember, the spell is just a catalyst. The real work must come from both of you." I thanked Madame Rose and returned home, feeling a new wave of hope. In the days that followed, I watched Alex closely, hoping to see some sign of change. To my surprise, he began to get closer again. He spent more time at home, was more affectionate, and seemed more present. "I'm sorry I've been distant," he said one night, as we sat on the couch. "I realized I was neglecting you, and I don't want to lose you." My heart filled with joy and relief. It seemed that Madame Rose's spell was working. Alex and I started spending more time together, rediscovering the connection we had lost. We took walks in the park, had dinner out, and talked at length about our dreams and plans. The weeks following Madame Rose's spell were full of hope and renewal. Alex seemed more present and affectionate, and I believed we were finally overcoming our difficulties. However, life has a cruel way of testing our convictions. It was on a Saturday afternoon that my friend Sarah called me, her voice filled with concern. "I need to talk to you," she said, without beating around the bush. "I saw something that I think you need to know." We arranged to meet at a nearby cafe, and my heart was racing as I waited. When Sarah arrived, she seemed hesitant, as if she didn't know where to start. "I saw Alex yesterday," she began, finally. "He was with a woman. They were at the mall together, very close. They seemed more than just friends or colleagues." I felt a knot form in my stomach. The possibility of betrayal was something I didn't even want to consider, but Sarah's words were hard to ignore. I thanked her for her honesty and went home, my mind in turmoil. I waited for Alex to come home that night, trying to stay calm. When he walked through the door, I looked at him, trying to find an explanation in his eyes. "We need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "A friend told me she saw you with a woman at the mall. What's going on?" Alex turned pale, and for a moment, he seemed lost. Then he spoke. "Which friend?" Trying to change the subject. "It doesn't matter," I said. "What were you doing with her?" He sighed deeply and sat on the sofa. "I didn't want you to find out like this," he began, his voice low. "Carla and we've grown close. I was confused, feeling pressured, and I ended up doing something I shouldn't have." His words were like a blow. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and despair. How could he do this to me? After everything we'd been through, after all the promises? "How could you?" I asked, my voice trembling. "After everything? I trusted you, Alex." He looked at me, his eyes full of guilt and regret. "I know, and I'm sorry. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. I don't want to lose you. I promise it won't happen again. I've already told her it can never happen again." Alex's words were desperate, but I was in a state of shock. All I wanted was to believe him, but the wounds of betrayal were deep. I needed time to think, to process everything. "I need some time, Alex," I said finally. "I need time to understand how I feel and decide what to do." Alex nodded, respecting my need for space. In the days that followed, he did everything to show he was sorry. He canceled commitments, spent more time with me, and tried to win me back in every possible way. I, on the other hand, was conflicted. Part of me wanted to believe that he could change, that we could overcome this together. Another part was tired, hurt, and insecure. I told Sarah about the situation, seeking her advice. "You need to follow your heart," she said, with her usual wisdom. "But remember, you deserve someone who values and respects you. If Alex can't be that person, maybe it's time to move on." Sarah's words resonated deeply with me. I knew she was right, but I still loved Alex and wanted to believe he could change. I decided to give him one last chance, but with clear conditions. He would have to prove his commitment, regain my trust, and show that he was really willing to change. Alex accepted my conditions, determined to make things work, and then he suggested that we take a significant step in our relationship, moving in together. We believed that this closeness could help us overcome the challenges and strengthen our connection. We found a cozy apartment in a quiet neighborhood, and the move was full of renewed expectations and hopes. The first few months were like a honeymoon. Alex and I decorated the apartment together, choosing furniture and details that reflected our tastes and personalities. We spent evenings cooking together, watching movies, and planning our future. I felt closer to Alex than ever before, and I believed we were finally on the right track. However, over time, I began to notice worrying signs. Alex, who had seemed so committed and present before, started to drift away again. He spent more time out, claiming work commitments or meetups with friends. The evenings that were once filled with laughter and conversations became lonely, with Alex coming home late and often already asleep when I woke up. I tried to ignore the signs, telling myself it was just a phase and that Alex was adjusting to his new job and responsibilities. But the sense of déjà vu was unavoidable. The insecurities and fears I had tried to overcome came back full force, and I found myself increasingly anxious and worried. One night, after another day alone, I decided to confront Alex. He came home late, with a tired and distant look. "We need to talk, Alex," I said, trying to stay calm. "I feel like we're drifting apart again. You spend so much time away, and I feel lonely. What's going on?" Alex sighed, avoiding my gaze. "I know I've been absent," he admitted finally. "Work has been stressful, and I've been trying to find a way to relax. But I don't want you to feel neglected. I'll try to be more present." Despite Alex's words, the situation didn't improve. He continued to go out for hours, often without explaining where he was or who he was with. Our relationship cooled, and the intimacy we had built seemed to disappear. I felt increasingly isolated, trapped in a cycle of hope and disillusionment. I talked to Sarah about the situation, seeking her advice and support. She listened patiently, her expression full of concern. "Honey, you can't go on like this," she said finally. "You deserve someone who is truly present and committed. If Alex can't be that person, maybe it's time to reconsider your options." The growing distance between Alex and me and the frustration of seeing my efforts fail again left me desperate. I knew I needed to do something drastic to save our relationship. It was then that I decided to return to Madame Rose, the spell woman, in search of a more powerful solution. I arrived at Madame Rose's house on a cloudy afternoon, feeling a weight in my heart. She greeted me with her welcoming smile, but her eyes showed that she understood the depth of my desperation. "I'm back, Madame Rose," I said, my voice trembling. "Things between Alex and me aren't good. I need something stronger, something that really works." Madame Rose looked at me with compassion and nodded slowly. "I knew you'd come back, my dear," she replied. "Love is a complicated force, and sometimes we need more powerful measures to restore balance. I have a spell, but it's strong and requires a sacrifice. Are you willing to do that?" I nodded, determined to do anything to save my relationship. "I'm willing, Madame Rose. I'll do whatever it takes." "This is the menstrual blood spell," she said, with a serious tone. "It's an ancient and powerful spell that deeply binds the souls of two people. But remember, my dear, true love cannot be forced. This spell only reinforces what already exists." She instructed me on how to collect a small amount of my menstrual blood and, well, I won't teach you how to do this spell here. You can research it on the internet. I've seen a lot of people talking about this menstrual blood spell. But be warned that it's a very powerful spell. I thanked Madame Rose and returned home, full of hope and determination. And to my surprise, that same evening, Alex said we needed to talk, his voice heavy with sadness. "I don't think we can go on like this. I love you, but I feel like we're hurting each other more than we're helping. I think it's best if we break up." His words were like a blow. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and despair. How could he do this, after everything we'd been through? "How could you?" I asked, my voice trembling. "After everything? I trusted you, Alex." He looked at me, his eyes full of guilt and regret. "I know, and I'm sorry, but I think we need to go our separate ways. I don't want to hurt you anymore." Tears streamed down my face as Alex packed his things and walked out the door. The spell I believed to be my last hope had failed. I felt lost, betrayed, and without direction. I returned to Madame Rose's house, seeking consolation and understanding. She received me with a sad but understanding look. "I believe the spell didn't have time to work, as you had already lost him before you came to me. You waited too long to come here." But she told me to think that. "Sometimes, my dear, we need to let go to find true happiness," she said softly. "True love can't be forced. You deserve someone who truly loves you, without needing spells." The breakup with Alex left me devastated. The days that followed were filled with sadness and despair. I felt as if a part of me had been torn away, leaving a painful and unbearable void. I spent hours crying, unable to find consolation or hope. The pain of abandonment was intense, All the broken promises, all the shattered hopes weighed on me like a mountain. The feeling of failure and not being enough consumed me, and my self-esteem plummeted with each passing day. Depression began to set in, making each day a struggle just to get out of bed. Sarah, my faithful friend, was always by my side, trying to cheer me up and remind me of my worth. But no matter how hard she tried, the darkness within me seemed impenetrable. "You need to take care of yourself, honey," Sarah said one afternoon as she brought me some hot soup. "This will pass, but you need to give yourself a chance to heal." The months following the breakup with Alex were an emotional roller coaster. With Sarah's support and therapy, I began to pick myself up. I rediscovered my inner strength and started rebuilding my life, step by step. I was finally beginning to find a new normal when, suddenly, Alex came back. It was on an autumn afternoon, while I was at home reading a book, that I heard a knock on the door. When I opened it, there he was, looking worn out and remorseful. My heart raced, a mixture of surprise, anger, and an emotion I couldn't identify. "Can we talk?" Alex asked, his voice soft and hesitant. I hesitated but eventually agreed. We sat on the couch, and he began to speak. "I can't forget you," he said, his eyes fixed on mine. "Since we broke up, my life has been chaos. I tried to move on, but nothing makes sense without you." Alex's words brought a wave of conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to hug him and forgive him, while another part was full of distrust and fear of being hurt again. "Alex, you hurt me deeply," I replied, my voice trembling. "I don't know if I can go through this again." He held my hands, his eyes full of remorse. "I know, and I'm sorry for everything, but I'm willing to do anything to regain your trust. Please, give me one last chance." Side note: at this moment, I saw myself performing the menstrual blood spell, and a quick passage through all the moments up to this one where Alex was asking to get back together and saying he loved me. Well, finally, the spell worked. His words, combined with the time we spent apart, made me reconsider. I still loved him, and the idea of trying again, of maybe finally finding happiness, was tempting. I decided to give him one last chance, but on the condition that he would need to prove his commitment and respect. In the first few days, Alex seemed to be the man I had always dreamed of. He was attentive, caring, and did everything to make me happy. However, over time, I began to notice a worrying change. Alex became excessively jealous and possessive. He started questioning my friendships, especially my relationship with Sarah. Whenever I went out, he wanted to know where I was, who I was with, and for how long. The constant messages and calls, which at first seemed caring, began to feel suffocating. One night, after dinner with Sarah, I returned home to find Alex waiting in the living room with a gloomy expression. "Why did you take so long?" he asked, his voice laden with distrust. "Were you with Sarah all this time?" I sighed, tired of the constant need to justify my movements. "Yes, I was with Sarah. We talked and lost track of time. You need to trust me, Alex." He shook his head, visibly irritated. "It's hard to trust when you're always with her. Sometimes I think you two have something more." His words were a blow. The insinuation that I could be cheating on him with my friend was absurd and hurtful. "That's ridiculous, Alex," I replied, my voice full of indignation. "Sarah is my friend, and you know that. This excessive jealousy is destroying us." Discussions about jealousy became frequent, and the relationship that I hoped would be a second chance began to deteriorate rapidly. Alex seemed unable to control his insecurities, and I found myself increasingly suffocated and unhappy. I talked to Sarah about the situation, seeking her advice. "You need to value yourself, honey," she said firmly. "True love isn't based on control and distrust. If Alex can't trust you, maybe he's not the right person." After weeks of growing tension with Alex, I was emotionally exhausted. The relationship was becoming unsustainable, and I knew I needed to make a decision soon. It was in the midst of this turmoil that fate brought me an unexpected surprise: a reunion with Ethan. I was at a pharmacy, buying some necessities, when I heard a familiar voice call my name. "Ashley? Is that you?" I turned and saw Ethan, my ex-boyfriend, standing there with a warm smile on his face. He looked different, more confident and well-dressed, radiating an aura of success. My heart skipped a beat, a mixture of nostalgia and curiosity. "Ethan!" I exclaimed, surprised. "It's been so long." We chatted for a few minutes, exchanging updates about our lives. He told me that he had finally managed to achieve his dreams of making money online. He had a successful digital marketing company and was investing in several lucrative projects. It seemed that everything he had fought for was finally coming to fruition. "I'm so happy for you, Ethan," I said, genuinely pleased about his achievements. "You always believed in your dreams, and now you're reaping the rewards." He smiled, but there was a glimmer of melancholy in his eyes. "And you, Ashley? How's life?" I hesitated for a moment, thinking about how to respond. I didn't want to burden him with my problems, but I also didn't want to lie. "Things have been complicated," I admitted finally. "I'm going through a difficult time in my relationship." Ethan nodded, seeming to understand more than I was saying. "If you need someone to talk to, I'm here," he offered gently. I thanked him, and we said goodbye, promising to keep in touch. As I walked back home, my mind was full of reflections about my choices and the path my life had taken. Meeting Ethan brought up old feelings and regrets that I had tried to bury. I remembered how our relationship had ended, how I had left Ethan because I believed he had no future. At the time, it seemed like the right decision, but now, seeing the successful and confident man he had become, I couldn't help but wonder how things could have been different. That night, while Alex was out, I sat in the living room and let my thoughts wander. I reflected on all the decisions I had made, on the ups and downs of my relationship with Alex, and on what I really wanted for my future. After the reunion with Ethan and deep reflection on my life, I decided that I needed to make a definitive decision about my relationship with Alex. His excessive jealousy and possessiveness were suffocating me and making any attempt at happiness impossible. One night, after another argument about my friendships and the time I spent away from home, I decided it was time to end it. I waited until Alex calmed down and sat next to him on the couch. "Alex, we need to talk seriously," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "Our relationship isn't working. The jealousy, the distrust. I can't go on like this. I think it's better if we break up." He looked at me, visibly shaken, and shook his head. "No, Ashley, please don't do this," he pleaded, holding my hands. "I know I've been jealous and controlling, but I can change. I love you, and I don't want to lose you." His words were desperate, but I knew I couldn't continue living that way. I needed to think about my own mental health and happiness. "Alex, I love you too, but this isn't doing us any good. We need space to understand our own feelings and priorities." He stood up abruptly, starting to pace back and forth in the room. "No, I can't let you go. We'll get through this together, I promise. I can't live without you." The intensity of his words and actions frightened me. Alex was refusing to accept reality and the need for space. I felt trapped, unable to find a peaceful way out. It was then that I thought if I undid the menstrual blood spell, Alex would finally let me go. I decided to seek out Madame Rose one more time, hoping she could help me find a solution. The next morning, I went to Madame Rose's house, feeling a mix of hope and desperation. She greeted me with her understanding and welcoming gaze. I explained the situation, telling her about Alex's excessive jealousy and my failed attempt to end the relationship. Madame Rose listened attentively, without interrupting. "The menstrual blood spell is powerful, but it can be undone," she said finally. "However, you need to be prepared for the consequences. The love he feels for you may turn into resentment or indifference." I knew it was a risk, but I was willing to face it. I needed to free myself from that toxic relationship and find my own peace. "I'm ready, Madame Rose. Do what's necessary." She began to prepare the ingredients to undo the spell. The ritual was intense, and when it was over, I thanked her and returned home. In the following days, I felt an immediate change in the air. Alex began to distance himself emotionally, and the intensity of his jealousy diminished. Alex and I tried to maintain a peaceful coexistence, but the connection between us was clearly broken. He spent more time away, and I focused on rebuilding my life, seeking to find peace and balance. It was during one of those lonely nights that I received a message from a mutual friend, saying she had seen Alex with another woman. Initially, I felt a wave of anger and disappointment, but I soon realized that this betrayal was, in fact, a liberation. Alex was repeating his patterns, and this only confirmed that our relationship had truly come to an end. I decided to confront him one last time, not with anger, but with the certainty that I needed to move on. "Alex, we need to talk," I said when he came home that night. "I know you're cheating on me again. This needs to end." He was silent for a moment, then sighed deeply. "I'm sorry, Ashley," he said finally. "I think you're right. We're not working, and I don't want to keep hurting you." There was genuine sadness in his eyes, but also acceptance. We both knew it was time to move on. "I'm sorry too, Alex," I replied, my voice calm. "But we need to free ourselves from each other to find the happiness we deserve." With that, Alex started packing his things to leave. There were no shouts, no heated arguments, just a mutual acceptance that our time together had come to an end. When he finally left, I felt a wave of relief and a new sense of freedom. The days that followed were of introspection and healing. I allowed myself to feel the pain of separation, but also began to rediscover my own strength and independence. Therapy and Sarah's support were crucial in this process, helping me find my way back to happiness. It was during this phase of renewal that I decided to reconnect with Ethan. Our reunion at the pharmacy had awakened old feelings, but also a new curiosity about the man he had become. I knew he was single and successful, and I wanted to better understand his achievements and share my own experiences. I sent him a message, suggesting coffee, and he promptly responded with enthusiasm. We arranged to meet at a cozy cafe downtown. When I arrived, he was already there, with a warm and welcoming smile. "Ashley, it's great to see you again," he said as he hugged me. We sat down and started talking, this time with more depth. Ethan told me about his journey, the challenges he faced, and the achievements he had made. I was impressed by his determination and resilience, and he seemed equally interested in hearing about my own journey of self-discovery and growth. "You've always been an amazing person, Ashley," he said sincerely. "I'm glad to see you've found your strength and independence." His words touched my heart. I realized that despite everything, there was still a connection between us, a possibility of a new beginning. "Thank you, Ethan," I replied, smiling. "I think we've both grown a lot since the last time we were together." We spent hours talking, laughing, and sharing stories. When we finally said goodbye, there was a sense of renewal and hope in the air. The days that followed were full of new possibilities. I continued to focus on my own happiness, exploring new hobbies, making new friends, and rediscovering my passion for life. Ethan and I continued to meet, building a new friendship based on mutual respect and admiration. And then, during one of our meetings, I thought about taking a step forward in our friendship. I was nervous as I waited for Ethan at the cafe where we had arranged to meet. It was a special place for us, full of memories of simpler and happier times. When he arrived, I felt a mix of anxiety and hope. He smiled when he saw me, and for a moment, all my worries seemed to disappear. "Hi, Ethan," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hi," he replied, sitting across from me. "How are you?" "I'm good," I answered, though my heart was racing. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something important." He nodded, looking curious. "Sure, go ahead." I took a deep breath, gathering courage. "Ethan, I've been thinking a lot about us, about the time we spent together and how much we meant to each other. I feel like we still have something special, and I'd like to know if you'd consider us getting back together." There was a moment of silence as my words hung in the air. Ethan looked at me with a serious expression, and I could see the internal struggle in his eyes. "Ashley," he began, his voice soft but firm. I understand what you're saying and I really appreciate your feelings. But at the moment, I prefer to stay single. When we broke up, it was very hard for me. I really suffered, and I don't want to go through that again. I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. I understand, Ethan. But I thought maybe we could try again. Do things differently this time. He held my hand, his touch gentle but firm. I know, Ashley. And believe me, I've thought about it a lot too. But right now, I need to focus on myself, on my well-being. I don't want to risk coming back and ending up hurting us again. I nodded, trying to hold back tears. That upsets me, but I respect your decision. Ethan squeezed my hand lightly. I don't want to lose your friendship, Ashley. You're a very important person to me, and our friendship means a lot. I hope we can continue being friends, even if things don't go back to the way they were. I took a deep breath, feeling the pain of rejection, but also the sincerity in his words. I don't want to lose your friendship either, Ethan. I just need some time to accept this. He nodded, understanding. Of course, I understand. Take all the time you need. I'm here for you. Always. We left the cafe with mixed feelings. The hope of rekindling our romance had been replaced by the acceptance that, at least for now, our paths wouldn't cross in the way I had hoped. But, at the same time, there was a sense of relief in knowing that our friendship still had an important place in our lives. As we walked in opposite directions, I promised myself that I would respect Ethan's space and value the friendship we still had. After all, some connections are strong enough to survive any storm, even if romantic love is no longer present. Thank you for listening to my story. I know it was a bit long, but I wanted to share the details of the mistakes and poor choices I made so that you don't repeat them and end up alone like me. Feel free to share your opinions in the comments. I'll be following along and reading them all.